Welcome back. Recently in a puzzle solving video, I came across this puzzle and I solved it. In other words, I got all the moves correct and I got the points for it. It gave me a new record high of puzzle rating, but I didn't quite understand everything that happened, so I'm going to go over it again just to make sure with the analysis board. Okay. Now, I guessed that the first move was to move my knight here because it threatened the queen and it couldn't be taken because that pawn, the g-pawn, is pinned by my queen. But that move surprised me. Here I had honestly expected the queen to move here to directly threaten my queen, and I wasn't sure why it went down there. And I guessed that the next move was to check with my knight, which I did, and the king moved up. And I wasn't sure exactly why. I didn't know why it didn't go over here, for example. Obviously, it had to get out of check, and I know why the queen didn't, capture the knight because it would lose a queen. But I thought the king would have moved there, and when it moved here, I correctly guessed that I had to take this and then get the queen for it. But I wasn't sure exactly why it all worked out. So let's look at the analysis board, which is cropped slightly differently, so I'm going to fix that. Okay, that's better. Now again, here, I did guess the first move. First, white plays this move, which is a blunder. White had the advantage until that pawn move. Now black has a huge advantage. And again, I thought here I'm threatening the queen, so it's causing some trouble. It's also, I figured, threatening a check here. It's threatening I can move my queen here depending on what happens and threaten checkmate. But here I thought white would challenge me directly because the knight on d4 guards f3. And then where would I go at that point? If I moved down here at that point to threaten mate, from there, doesn't the queen still guard this square? And also, once I move my queen, then I'm not threatening mate anymore because now this pawn isn't pinned and it would take my knight. So I wanted to find out, why wouldn't the computer move here? What's so wrong with that? Okay, it says from here I can check on h3, which, I might have seen that in a game, or if that was the puzzle's move. But then again, doesn't the king just move up? And then what can I do? It says the king would move over, but coming up isn't much worse. Now moving here to f1, it says is mate in 2. Let's just, I'm not seeing it. But before I move, I am seeing that my e-rook cuts off the entire e-file from the king, so cutting off these two squares from the king. And I am seeing that my rook down here on the second rank hits this, as does my knight. So maybe that's it. If the king moves here, I'll have a mate there once I get rid of the queen. I think that's it. It doesn't matter what they do here. Well, it says if they don't take my queen, I'm going to have a mate there. But what if they do take my queen, then I have mate here. Okay, I did figure that part out. So, but let's go back to here when the queen moved over. That's if I check with the knight and the king moves to f1, which I assumed it would move here. And it says now I would take on f2 because the only thing guarding that is the queen. And so the queen would basically have to take, because if the king moved back, then I would just take the queen. Okay, so the queen takes, and then my knight would take their queen, and we would end up, okay, that ends up in basically the situation that we got with the puzzle, or very close, where if the king takes the knight, then I get the rook. Okay, And I'm up a queen for 2 minor pieces. Okay. So I think I followed that out. Why the queen wouldn't move there, because it basically ends up in the same position. And in the puzzle, the queen moved down here. I think I had already determined that if they moved this pawn up, well, I had got that wrong. I had thought if they moved the pawn up, I would go here, threatening mate this way. And it says that's not it. If they move this pawn up, I would have gotten that wrong. I have to check here first. And it doesn't matter which way the king moves, and it has to move, then I would have a forced mating sequence by moving the queen here next. So I'd have... Okay, see, I would have gotten that part wrong in the puzzle because I would have moved the queen here first, thinking I was threatening mate. What's the downside of that? It says they would play queen to c2. Am I reading this wrong? That's Stockfish's top move. Queen to c2. Wouldn't I just take it? And then what would they do? Oh, this rook is guarding that square. And now the rook is protecting from mate. Okay. I understand that. So backing up, after I moved here in the puzzle, so now I understand why the queen wouldn't have moved here, because it's not horrible, according to Stockfish, but it would have ended up in about the same position that we ended up in anyway. And I understand now why the pawn is bad, but if they had moved the pawn, I would have probably played the wrong move, because I'd already guessed that that was one of their possibilities, and then I would move my queen here. That would have been wrong, because the rook and this queen both hit c2, and it would have blocked this rook from coming across. So I would have had to bring the rook first, and I don't know that I would have seen that. Okay, but in the puzzle, what they did was queen back here to f1, which guards here and here. It protects both of those squares. But I checked here. I guessed that correctly because I figured there wasn't anything else they could do. And in the puzzle, the king went here, but why wouldn't it have gone to h1? What's bad about going to h1? It doesn't matter. I would still be able to hit this with my rook. Okay, so I hit this with my rook. And it says that rx f7. Wow, it says that Stockfish says their best move is to take here. Adding a defender to that. But then I would just take, I think? Yeah. Okay. Let's say they took there because that's their best move. And then I have by far a best move, which is to take back. So if the puzzle had gone that way, if the king had moved, that's what looks like would have happened. But backing up, I would have had... Would I have found this? I think so, because that's what I found anyway. Okay. But the king didn't go there. In the puzzle, the king came forward. And I found this, which works out about the same, except this time it's a check. And it's my only good move that doesn't go back to equality. And the queen took. And then I felt like the puzzle ended early. Because the queen took, and I took back, and that's where the puzzle stopped. Is that because... And it doesn't say that the king taking the knight is one of the best moves. It says rook to f1 is one of their best moves. No, it's changed now. Rook to e1. Sorry, rook to e1 or rook to f1. Or it says now rook to d2. All of those would be one of those would be the move played by... That's because if the king takes the knight, I would win the rook. So it's saying to move the rook first. And then I don't have any obvious best moves. Although the rook is not defending the knight anymore. So I would take the knight, I think. But what if it had gone here instead? Then what would I do? I don't have an obvious best move again. Knight to h3. Knight to d1. Oh, because it's guarded by my queen. Okay. I think I understand. I guess that it just didn't. Each one of the moves that I made during the puzzle, I was guessing at because I didn't find anything better. Other than this one. I thought this one was pretty sharp, but then I didn't know after that. Again, I thought the queen would move here or the pawn would come up. And I think if they had done either one of those, I would have made the wrong choice afterward. But as it turned out, when it went here, I made the right choice. And then when it went here, I did make the right choice. And basically, they're forced to take. If they don't take here, it's mate in 3. And then after they did take, it was obvious to me that if I didn't capture back, I'm in big trouble. So I captured back and the puzzle stopped. Okay, so if they took here, I would win the rook. If they moved the rook, if they moved the rook off the d file, I would have the knight. And if they kept the rook on the d file, I would be able to do something else, like challenge the rook this way or something. Okay, well, thanks for sticking with me. I think one of my subscribers, Anderson Connors, had commented on that puzzle solving video and said, hey, why not a separate video showing this and explaining it all? So that's what I've done here. I hope it was helpful to you. I think it was helpful to me seeing some of the other possibilities that I missed during the puzzle solving. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.